I am reading from Matthew chapter 24 still, picking up in verse 15 and reading down to verse 22. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of the house. And let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation such as not been seen since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. This is one of the most frequent passages cited by end times experts. I find it difficult to give a lot of credence to people who portray themselves as experts on the end times. It seems that the pattern of prophecy is that we never really understand it until the fulfillment has already passed. But God does give us these descriptions and these prophecies for a reason. We are supposed to study them, and we are supposed to try to understand what they mean. And Yeshua in this passage is giving us very specific warnings. He's saying, watch for this abomination of desolation and be prepared to flee when you see it. The abomination of desolation refers to a passage in Daniel. It's Daniel chapter 11, verse 31. Let me pull it up here. Chapter 11, verse 31. And forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress, and they shall take away the daily sacrifices, and place there the abomination of desolation. Now, let me talk a little bit more about Matthew 24, and I'll come back to that. Yeshua says that after this abomination of desolation, there will be great tribulation, like we have never seen before in all of history and will never be seen again. So we know that this will be just an extraordinary time. He says when we see it, we're to flee. Now, presumably he's talking about Jerusalem in particular. And, those in Judea, he says, flee to the mountains. Does that mean the rest of us in the world need to be ready to flee? Well, I think that this tribulation, it's not going to be limited to just the land of Israel. So I think that believers all around the world need to be watching for this and need to be ready just in case. But he says that, if you're in the field, don't go back to your house. Don't go back for your coat. That means there's not going to be time to pack a bunch of stuff up. If you got your bug out pack at home, you can't go back and get it. Just go. Now, maybe we're going to have a little bit more time outside of the land of Israel. I don't really know. Sorry, it's getting a little chilly out here. He says, pray that this won't happen in the winter or on a Sabbath or, when you're pregnant or have small children even, because that's going to make your flight that much more difficult. The ancient Jews they took the Sabbath so seriously that they wouldn't even defend the city of Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And the city was captured several times because of that. And honestly, I think that's taking it a little too far. I don't think that's what God intended. But Yeshua is warning because that's how people see the Sabbath. Fleeing an invading army is definitely a strenuous task, and that's something that God said not to do on the Sabbath. So is it okay to do strenuous labor in order to save your life? I think so. I think that's allowed on the Sabbath. But I can certainly see why many people don't believe that and why they would not want to flee even during an invasion on the Sabbath. I think people have, let me talk about a few different ways of interpreting in applying prophecy. Most people in the world, they don't really believe in biblical prophecy. They'll believe in psychics and all kinds of crazy things. But they don't believe that there's real prophecy in the Bible. So they'll say that, Daniel was written long after the events it describes. So it had to have been written after Antiochus Epiphanes. That the Gospels had to be written after the fall of Jerusalem because they describe the fall in too much detail. Well, that's just ridiculous. That's assuming the conclusion. That's called begging the question. If prophecy is real, then there's no reason to date Daniel after Antiochus. There's no reason to doubt that Daniel himself wrote it. Yeshua said that Daniel wrote it. So I'll go with that. There's no reason to date the writing of Luke or Mark or Matthew after 70 AD when Jerusalem was destroyed, because prophecy is real. Why couldn't Yeshua predict the exact destruction of Jerusalem? There's all kinds of reasons for believing that all three Gospels were written long before 70 AD. That's for another set of videos, though. So fake prophecy is the first view. The second view is preterist. The preterist believes that most or all prophecy has already been fulfilled, that especially all of these prophecies in Matthew 24 were fulfilled in 70 AD when General Titus destroyed Jerusalem. And then futurist believes that these prophecies are still to be fulfilled in the future, that Titus did not fulfill these prophecies. But there's another view of prophecy, a more cyclical view, and I don't know the technical term. I know some people will call it telescopic prophecy. I don't think that really fits, but I think the preterist view and the futurist view both misunderstand the nature of biblical prophecy. There is no single fulfillment of a biblical prophecy. For example, Passover looks back at the original Passover in Exodus, but Passover existed before that. Lot and Abraham, the events that happened at Sodom before God destroyed Sodom mirrored the events of Passover. They ate unleavened bread. There was death at the door. The people had to stay inside the house if they wanted to be saved. And then they had to follow the angel to safety. Well, this is a prophecy of Passover. But it's also, Passover also prophesies the coming of the Redeemer. And it probably prophesies something yet to come, too. And Daniel's prophecy of the Abomination of Desolation, it was fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes in about 168 BC. He desecrated the temple, sacrificed. He stopped the morning and evening sacrifices, and he sacrificed pigs on the altar. And then in 70 AD, the Roman general Titus destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and he very likely sacrificed pigs on the site of the temple because that was a Roman custom. They would sacrifice a pig, an ox, maybe a sheep. I can't remember the exact sequence, but that was how they cleansed desecrated ground. Obviously, that makes the problem worse in God's view because pigs are unclean. You can't sacrifice a pig. So that would be an abomination of desolation. There's desolation and there's the desecration of the holy site. But Yeshua says that he says that you're to flee when you see the abomination of desolation. But in 70 AD, the war was over at that point. The war had been raging for a couple of years, and the destruction of the Antonian fortress, I think it was called, and the temple was the culmination of the war. And Titus sacrificed a pig as a sort of celebration at the end. If you waited until you saw the abomination of desolation in 70 AD, you would be dead or enslaved. So that doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't follow what Yeshua said. If you were to follow Yeshua's warning, you'd be doomed. No. That was a fulfillment, but it was not the fulfillment. the fulfillments of biblical prophecy come in cycles. The prophecy gets fulfilled over and over again, and each time it may be closer or a little bit further from a complete fulfillment. It's like, the reason they call this telescopic is that there are multiple fulfillments that get larger and larger as you zoom in to the real final fulfillment. But I think it's incomplete because the final in double quotes, fulfillment of a prophecy could happen at any time, and then there could be echoes of that later on in smaller fulfillments. It doesn't follow the biblical pattern to say there is one and only one fulfillment of a prophecy. Antiochus, he fulfilled Daniel's prophecy of the Abomination of Desolation. Titus did it. If you go back before Daniel, the Babylonians did it. When they invaded and they sacked the temple, the Egyptians sacked the temple once. Or maybe that was the Jewish king who sacked it for them. I can't remember. And it's going to happen again. I assume that means that a temple will be physically rebuilt, but something will happen that will cause some sort of idol or some kind of desecration of a future temple, and that will be the sign that the Great Tribulation is starting imminently. Not within a couple of years, but within hours. That's why Yeshua says, don't go back to your house and get your cloak. It's time to go. You need to run. If you can drive. Keep an emergency pack in your car. It's always a good idea anyways, because you never know when a natural disaster or something's going to happen. There's another reference I want to read to you real quick. I believe that this is in Revelation 13. I believe there's a direct reference to this future fulfillment. Revelation 13, I'm just going to read a couple of verses just to give you an idea. This is about the first beast that rises up out of the sea. He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. So that's like a desecration of the temple. And then he's given authority to make war against the saints. So when you see that desecration of the temple, it's time to flee. And then again further down, a second beast that comes out of the earth. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Now, I don't know how much of that is metaphor and how much is literal, but it certainly sounds a lot like the Abomination of Desolation that both Antiochus and Titus performed. They both fulfilled this prophecy, but there is a much greater prophecy coming. There have been much worse wars than the war that Titus waged against Judah in the first century. Much worse. But Yeshua says there has never been a tribulation like this one. So there's another one coming, and it is going to be much worse. So watch for that abomination, and then we will know that the Great Tribulation is about to start. This is Jay Carper from American Torah. Be blessed. Keep your eyes open.